The message popped up on my phone at exactly 7:42 p.m., breaking the usual rhythm of our nightly texts. My girlfriend, Jenna, had typed, "I need a break to figure myself out. No contact." I read it 3 times, word by word. No emojis, no explanation, no apology. Just a single, cold statement with 0 invitation for dialogue. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair, analyzing the situation. An emotional reaction would be counterproductive. I needed data, patterns, and control. This wasn't about feelings, it was about boundaries, information, and strategy. I reviewed the past 6 months with Jenna, delayed replies, short calls, last-minute cancellations, subtle changes in tone. Each detail was stored in my mental spreadsheet. Behavioral patterns rarely change without reason. Tonight's message wasn't random, it was the culmination of a series of signals, and I had to treat it as such. Options were clear. Calling her immediately would expose emotional vulnerability. Texting impulsively could cede control. Ignoring the situation completely would leave me in the dark. The best course of action was observation. Gather more information, log behaviors, and plan the next move carefully. Less than an hour later, a new notification arrived. This time, it wasn't from Jen, it was her mum, Jenna. "Don't forget to update everyone." I opened it and saw Jenna tagged in a photo with her mother, smiling casually. Publicly carefree, privately cold. This contrast wasn't coincidental. Logically, there were 2 possibilities. Either she didn't care about my reaction, or she was testing my limits. Either way, rash action would be a mistake. I didn't respond. No calls, no texts, no social media reactions. Every action had to be deliberate. I observed, analyzed, and planned. The information from her post, the original message, and our recent interactions all fed into a mental map for my next steps. I paced around my apartment, processing every detail. The quiet of the city outside contrasted sharply with the mental activity inside. I catalogued everything: word choice, tone, timing, and even body language from recent encounters. All of it would inform my strategic response. I also analyzed my own emotions. Disappointment and frustration were natural, but I couldn't let them dictate actions. Boundaries had to be respected. No impulsive social media reactions. No letting friends influence my response, and no letting raw emotion color the message I would eventually send. Every step needed to be grounded in logic. Before bed, I synthesized all the data: the cold, final message requesting no contact, the public image with her mum that contradicted the private message, subtle behavioral shifts over the past weeks. I defined the goal. The next message I send must be clear, factual, and concise. No blame, no drama. Its purpose is to re-establish boundaries, maintain control, and ensure clarity in the relationship dynamics. Sitting on my bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew this wasn't the climax. This was just the opening move in a strategic game. The next step depended on how I interpreted and acted on the data collected tonight. Calm and calculation were my only tools. By the time I finally turned off the lights, no messages had been sent. Every notification, every online interaction had been mentally logged. The emotional sting was present, but controlled. I was ready for the next step with data, strategy, and full control over my actions. Jenna and I had been together for 2 years. On paper, it looked like a standard young adult relationship in the city. We shared an apartment in a modest yet functional building, went out for casual dinners, took weekend drives to the suburbs, and occasionally binge-watched shows until sunrise. To friends, we seemed inseparable, but in reality, the relationship was more nuanced, a series of micro-adjustments, compromises, and calculated observations. I knew Jenna better than anyone else, or so I believed. She was intelligent, independent, and meticulous, often planning her days down to the hour. That precision extended to her social media behavior, where every post, every story, and every tag felt deliberate. Over time, I learned to read patterns in her online activity as accurately as I did in her speech and gestures. In the months leading up to tonight, I noticed subtle shifts. She would pause before replying to messages, even ones that normally received immediate responses. Certain inside jokes we shared were met with half smiles or delayed laughter. Weekend plans she had enthusiastically confirmed weeks prior were sometimes cancelled last minute with minimal explanation. Each of these occurrences alone was minor. Combined, they painted a consistent pattern. I catalogued each incident. Every behavioral deviation became a data point in a mental spreadsheet: dates, times, exact wording, tone, and nonverbal cues. This methodical approach wasn't obsessive, it was strategic. Understanding her patterns allowed me to anticipate outcomes, minimize conflict, and preserve personal agency. I didn't react emotionally. I analyzed our dynamic had always been one of mutual independence, masked by closeness. While we spent time together, we respected each other's autonomy. Jenna prided herself on her ability to navigate personal growth without dependency, and I valued my own autonomy. That balance worked until subtle misalignments started to accumulate unnoticed. The past month had been particularly revealing. Jenna had taken on a new role at work that required longer hours and higher stress management. I noted her changes in punctuality, responsiveness, and conversational engagement. Each adjustment was rationalized logically: higher workload, emotional bandwidth limits, stress management. Yet, when combined with her social media activity posts that were carefully curated, occasionally highlighting fun without me, the picture became less straightforward. This was the environment that contextualized her message tonight. I need a break to figure myself out. No contact. To an outside observer, it might seem abrupt or emotionally charged. But for someone who had been tracking patterns and analyzing behavior, it was a continuation, a logical next step in a series of signals. It was not random, nor was it solely emotional. It was calculated, intentional, and consequential. I also considered her family dynamics. Her mother was active online, often blurring boundaries between private and public life. Posts, tags, and shared photos were sometimes strategic, sometimes inadvertent, but always impactful. This explained the tagging incident tonight. Even if Jenna hadn't initiated it, the context suggested that she either tolerated it or failed to anticipate its effect on me. Either scenario was a test, intentional or not. It provided new data to analyze and incorporate into my decision-making. I spent the early hours of the evening cataloging past behaviors against current events. Each observation was paired with a potential explanation and a predicted outcome. For example, delayed message response could indicate mental space needed. Cancelled plans might reflect prioritization of personal time. Public photo with mother could signify testing, my reaction, or simply oversight. Each hypothesis was assessed for probability and impact. Understanding these dynamics allowed me to maintain emotional equilibrium. Instead of reacting impulsively, I treated the situation like a complex system, identifying variables and predicting consequences. This approach enabled me to preserve both dignity and control. I wasn't just surviving the moment. I was preparing for the next interactions with precision and clarity. By 3 a.m., I had a comprehensive mental map. Jenna's message indicated a deliberate need for space. Her recent behaviors reflected minor but consistent shifts in engagement. Her mother's social media presence complicated private boundaries. Patterns suggested that immediate emotional confrontation would reduce my control and limit clarity. This systematic evaluation transformed potential anxiety into actionable insight. I knew that when I eventually responded, it would not be out of desperation or frustration, but based on logical assessment and observed data. The night's analysis was not about winning or losing. It was about preserving agency, understanding variables, and preparing for calculated next steps. By sunrise, the mental inventory was complete. The city outside was waking up, indifferent, and that indifference mirrored the objective stance I had maintained all night. I had absorbed the data, identified patterns, and established initial boundaries in my mind. Jenna's request for a break was no longer a shock, it was a new scenario to navigate with strategic precision. The next morning, I stayed silent. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't post anything on social media. Every move had to be calculated, because by now I knew clearly any impulsive reaction would cost me control. But the real conflict wasn't just that she wanted space. It came from the way she or the situation publicly shared private information that I should have been the first to know. Her mum posted a picture, tagged Jenna, and I saw it first. There she was, smiling and laughing in public, while her private messages to me were cold and decisive. This contrast wasn't accidental. It created a tension. Public versus private, presence versus absence, caring versus indifference. I ran through the possibilities. Maybe Jenna didn't care about my reaction. Maybe she wanted to test my limits and self-control. Or maybe she didn't plan it at all. But the actions still had consequences. Each scenario had data I could analyze and a strategy I could prepare. I decided to step outside and walk around the neighborhood. The quiet space helped me organize the data in my mind. I sorted the elements. Jenna's no-contact message, clear and final. The photo of her laughing with her mum, in stark contrast to her private message. The signs over the past few weeks, slow replies, short calls, cancelled plans. Every detail was data, not emotion. The conflict became clearer when I considered my own reaction. Feelings of disappointment, anger, or hurt might arise, but I wouldn't let them control my actions. I set rules. No immediate response, no influence from friends or social media. Every reply had to be logical and evidence-based. I started predicting Jenna's possible reactions. She might explain, deny, or stay completely silent. Each possibility required a different strategy. I realized this conflict wasn't just about personal feelings. It was about controlling information and setting boundaries. Over the next few hours of walking and observing, I analyzed all her recent behaviors, every text, every small action, even changes in her routine. I assessed probabilities and potential consequences. I didn't let emotion take over. I just recorded and prepared for the next steps. By nightfall, I sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street. Conflict wasn't yelling or arguing. It was a matrix of behaviors and information that needed decoding. I had the data, I understood the patterns, and I was planning my response. Any impulsive move could ruin the control I had built. In my mind, I calculated, if I texted right now, she might get defensive, misunderstand, or push away completely. If I waited, kept observing, and continued analyzing the data, I'd have a better chance to understand her true intentions and how she wanted this break to play out. The real conflict was between data and emotion. Hurt, disappointment, or anxiety were natural, but what I did next had to be logical. I decided the only strategic move was silence, observation, and preparing a response based on facts. By the end of the night, I returned to my apartment, recording in my mind everything I had observed and analyzed. The conflict wasn't resolved, but I had turned it into data, creating leverage. I went to sleep, clear-headed, unshaken by emotion, knowing tomorrow would be the next step in taking control of the relationship, one measured move at a time. The next day, I stayed completely silent. No texts, no calls, no traces on social media. Every move had to be deliberate, because by now I knew clearly any impulsive reaction would cost me control and give her the upper hand. I spent the morning reviewing old messages, every word, every punctuation mark, the timing of replies, her choice of words. Even small patterns I had ignored before now felt meaningful. I noticed a pattern. Jenna often pulls away for a while to test my reaction, but she always leaves a small open door, a chance for me to respond. That was the key. Recognizing this pattern meant I could anticipate her next move and control the situation. I decided on a clear three-step strategy: observe, analyze, respond with evidence. In my mind, I ran through dozens of scenarios. She might explain, deny, or stay completely silent. For each scenario, I imagined exactly how I would respond. If she texted an apology, I would remain cold but guide the conversation on my terms. If she posted another picture or status, I would analyze body language, facial expressions, and timing before responding to maintain my advantage. If she avoided contact entirely, I would patiently observe, record data, and wait for her true intentions to reveal themselves. That afternoon, I walked through the park near my apartment. The quiet helped me review the data and evaluate possibilities. I observed everything around me: couples passing by, glances exchanged, subtle interactions, small habits people unconsciously repeat. I reminded myself that human behavior follows patterns, and patterns can be predicted if you're patient and observant. I even compared Jenna's habits to general human behavior to identify points I could use to maintain control. Throughout the afternoon, I catalogued every sign: slow text replies, short calls, cancelled plans, the way she interacted with friends and on social media. Every small detail was classified: direct data, indirect evidence, and hidden behaviors that might reveal true feelings. I reminded myself that the smallest, seemingly insignificant details often determine the next move. By evening, I returned to my apartment and mentally created a strategy board: her recent behaviors, timelines, changes in routines, and public versus private actions. I planned every step. No immediate response, no emotional influence. Only acting once I had enough data and probabilities calculated. I imagined possible scenarios for tomorrow. If she messaged first, how would I respond? If she posted publicly, how would I handle it? If she remained silent, I would stay patient, observe, and collect more information. Before going to bed, I sat by the window, watching the dim glow of streetlights. I reminded myself, today's actions were complete. Data was gathered, scenarios outlined, strategy in place. I went to bed clear-headed, knowing that tomorrow would be the day of response, but it would be a planned, calculated response, step by step, with full control in my hands. I felt a clear understanding in this conflict. Controlling information and understanding her behavior mattered more than any personal feelings. Every step, every observation, every choice was designed to create an advantage. I was ready to act, but on my terms, not impulsively, not emotionally, only based on logic, data, and strategy. The next morning, I woke up, clear-headed, focused, and determined. I didn't rush to check my phone or scroll through social media. The first thing I did was review all the data from the previous day. Messages, photos, her behavior, habits, the timing and tone of her reactions. Every detail, no matter how small, was catalogued. New data from last night was added, gradually forming a complete picture of Jenna's behavior and mindset. I reminded myself, even the smallest details can hold the key. I noticed something important. She was keeping her distance, but not completely withdrawing. Tiny signals, the timing of her replies, word choices, the way she posted photos, showed careful calculation. This was my opportunity to control the progression instead of letting emotions dictate my actions. I repeated it to myself. Every response must be based on data and probability, not on feelings of hurt or anger. The morning passed in careful observation. I walked around the neighborhood, breathing in fresh air, while observing everything around me. Passers-by fleeting glances, subtle gestures, unconscious habits people repeated. I compared these behaviors to Jenna's patterns, looking for similarities and differences, recording potential clues. Even details that seemed irrelevant became puzzle pieces in the data matrix I was constructing by midday. I decided to cautiously test a response. I sent a short, neutral text, no emotion, no questions, no blame, just a simple signal of my presence. Immediately, I monitored her reaction. How quickly she read it, her speed in replying, word choice, subtle shifts in tone. Every detail was recorded as data, not emotion. In the afternoon, I walked through the streets we had once walked together. Every familiar location, every scene brought back memories, but I didn't let nostalgia or emotion cloud my judgment. Instead, I used those memories to analyze her potential behavior, how she interacts with spaces, how she maintains distance from others, and signs of calculated action in her habits. Every observation added another piece to the puzzle, reinforcing my understanding of her patterns by evening. I returned to my apartment and mentally constructed a strategy board. Her recent behaviors, timelines, changes in routine, public versus private actions. I mapped out scenarios. If she texted first, how I would respond. If she posted something publicly, how I would handle it. If she remained silent, I would remain patient, observe, and collect more data. Every possibility had a plan, based on probabilities and consequences, not feelings. I realized that the progression of this conflict was not a straight line, but a chain of strategic steps. Observe, gives. Analyze, gives. Test responses, gives. Record results, gives. Repeat. Each correct step strengthened my advantage. Each misstep could cost control. My goal was clear: maintain initiative, control information, and guide all actions according to the plan I had calculated. Before going to bed, I sat by the window, watching the dim glow of streetlights. I reminded myself, today I had completed a full cycle of data gathering and response testing. Her patterns were clearer. She wanted distance, yet she was still observing, calculating my reactions. The narrow openings she left were opportunities for me to assert influence. I went to sleep clear-headed, knowing that every day, every action, was a step toward taking full control of the relationship, one strategic move at a time. The next morning, I woke up, clear-headed and alert. No hesitation, no delay. I knew today would be the turning point, where all the data, analysis, and strategy I had gathered would be put to the test. I didn't rush to check my phone or social media. Instead, I reviewed everything again. Old messages, photos, public and private interactions, subtle changes in her routines, even details that seemed insignificant but might carry hidden meaning. I readied myself to take decisive action, relying entirely on logic, not emotion. The morning passed in quiet observation. I walked around the neighborhood, breathing in the air while processing all the information in my mind. I observed every small gesture, fleeting glance, and unconscious habit in the people around me. I compared each behavior to Jenna's patterns, looking for similarities and differences, potential clues about her next moves. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle, each one contributing to a larger understanding of her tendencies. By midday, I decided to make a cautious, proactive move. I sent her a short, direct message, no accusations, no complaints, no pressure, just a signal to test her response. Immediately, I watched closely how quickly she read it, how she chose her words, subtle shifts in tone, even the pauses between sentences. Every tiny detail was recorded as data, analyzed, and measured for probability, completely divorced from my emotions. Before long, she replied. The response was brief, cold, but with an undertone that was difficult to read. I scrutinized every word, every punctuation mark, every space. Each tiny element could reveal her true intentions. This was the climax I had been preparing for: her data, my response, and the ability to anticipate the next move. I reminded myself, personal feelings had no place here. Every action had to be guided by logic, strategy, and control. In the afternoon, I walked through familiar streets we had once shared. Every corner, every landmark brought back memories, but I didn't let nostalgia or emotion cloud my judgment. Instead, I used those memories to analyze her potential behavior, how she interacts with spaces, how she keeps distance from others, and signs of calculated thought in her habits. Each observation added another piece to the puzzle, reinforcing the picture I had constructed of her behavior in my mind. The climax was not a single emotional eruption, it was the convergence of data and strategy. I felt the tension in every small detail: messages, expressions, distance, silence. Any one element could shift the balance of power in the relationship. I recorded, analyzed, predicted, and mapped out every possible next step. Night fell, and I returned to my apartment, sitting by the window, staring at the quiet streetlights. I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and focused on the day's details, her reactions, the narrow openings she had unwittingly left, subtle signals in her behavior. I knew that the true climax wasn't a shouting match or an emotional explosion. was the convergence of observation, data, testing, and strategy, where every action was calculated. I went to bed knowing I was prepared for any reaction she might have, step by step, with the advantage firmly in my hands. I reminded myself that today's peak wasn't the end, it was a turning point, where all future decisions and responses would rely on the verified data and strategy. Every move from here on out would be critical, and I was ready to maintain control, guide the relationship, and shape the future according to the plan I had meticulously constructed. The next morning, I woke up feeling both relieved and clear-headed. After days of observing, analyzing, and testing responses, I realized that all the data, every behavior, every reaction from Jenna had converged, allowing me to make the final decision. The feelings of emptiness, frustration, or anxiety were gone. What remained was clarity. I held the advantage, step by step, with all the facts in my hands. I began the day with a walk around the neighborhood. The quiet streets, sunlight filtering through the trees, birds singing in the distance, and the rhythm of my footsteps reminded me that everything could be observed, analyzed, and predicted. I paid attention to every small detail, how people moved, how their eyes met, the way they spoke, even the tiniest gestures. I compared all these behaviors to Jenna's patterns, searching for signals, clues, and potential openings that could reveal her next moves. Every detail, no matter how minor, was a piece of the puzzle, contributing to a bigger understanding of her tendencies. By midday, I decided to make a strategic move. I sent a short, neutral message, not complaining, not questioning, just enough to provoke a response. I monitored closely how long it took her to read it, how quickly she replied, her word, choice, tone, the pauses between words. Every tiny detail was recorded as data, analyzed for probability, and added to my mental matrix. I didn't allow emotion to interfere. Everything was based on logic and strategy. Soon, she responded. The message was brief, cold, but carried subtle, hard-to-read undertones. I read it over and over, analyzing every word, punctuation mark, spacing, and hidden nuance. Every element could reveal her intentions. This was the climax I had been preparing for. Her data, my reaction, and the ability to adjust strategy in I reminded myself, personal feelings had no place here. Every action had to be grounded in logic, strategy, and control. In the afternoon, I walked through streets we had once shared. Every cafe, bridge, and corner brought back memories, but I didn't let nostalgia cloud my judgment. I used these memories to understand her behavioral patterns more deeply, how she interacted with spaces, maintained distance from others, and subtly controlled her presence. I imagined multiple scenarios: if she acted defensively, if she stayed silent, if she tried to regain control through public or indirect means. I prepared responses for each possibility, refining my strategy with every small observation I had made throughout the day. By nightfall, I returned to my apartment and sat by the window, staring at the streetlights glimmering below, the occasional car passing by, the quiet interspersed with faint city sounds. I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and focused on every detail: messages, expressions, distance, silence, her presence. I realized that the true climax was not a shouting match or an emotional explosion. It was the convergence of observation, data, testing, and strategy, where every action was carefully calculated. Step by step, inside, I felt both powerful and calm. I understood that this relationship didn't end with anger or conflict. It ended with the ability to maintain advantage, control the situation, and understand both her and myself. I had transformed every negative emotion into data, experience, and inner strength. Late into the night, I reviewed everything in my mind, every message, every behavior, every subtle signal, every response. Each detail was evidence of how I maintained control. I reminded myself that from now on, every move in this relationship would be guided by data and strategy, not fleeting emotions. I was prepared for any response from her, step by step, with the advantage securely in my hands. Finally, I went to bed completely calm. The conflict had passed, the climax was over, and I had turned every tension, every anxiety, every hurt into a system of data and analysis. I knew that any future move would be carefully considered, meticulously analyzed, and fully controlled, step by step. I slept with the confidence that no matter how the world changed or how others behaved, I would maintain the advantage, protect my boundaries, and guide the relationship intelligently, strategically, and with complete awareness.